Chapter 12. Danger. The door from the outer room opened. Jake came in, carrying 3 bowls of stew. Ben Grint followed with a loaf of bread and a jug of water. "Here's your grub," said Jake, dumping his load on the floor. "Make the most of it, for you won't get no more till morning. And don't try nothing," he added threateningly, "for I'd like nothing better than to put it across you." His fierce dark eyes were on Chad. Plainly, he had not forgotten how Chad had bowled him over. Grint cut in harshly. "Shut your mouth, you long fool, and come on out o' this." Ben put the bread down and went out. Clive picked up his bowl of stew, sniffed it a little suspiciously, then tasted it. His face cleared. Rabbit with onions and potatoes. One of those chaps knows how to cook. He set to work on the food. The storm showed no signs of abating. The rain still drummed on the roof, and every now and then a flash and a crash. Seemingly, Jan was right in his prophecy. There was no sign of the storm ceasing. Chad finished his stew and set the bowl down. "Jan," he said, "there's one thing worries me. Where's our light coming from? For the mine, I mean." "I've a torch," said Clive quickly. "And they've left us one candle in here," Jan added. Chad shook his head. "It's half burned now, and it'll be more than half burned by the time we get into the mine. We haven't 2 hours light at best, and we may be doubled that time or more in the mine." "Us will have to chance it," Jan said soberly. "If us don't get back home afore morning, who's to say what'll happen?" Chad nodded gravely. "All right, we'll chance it. It's getting dark now. We'd best start on those boards." Clive spoke. "Suppose they come in for the dishes?" "That would be awkward," Chad said. "See here, Clive, you listen at the door, and if you hear them coming, give us the office." Clive went to the door, then came back. "I can do better than that. There's a crack I can see through. They're still feeding, so I can tell you if they move." Chad's face cleared. "Fine. Then we'll get to it, Jan." The rain pounding on the roof quite drowned any small noises made by the two in ripping away the boards, and the boards were so rotten that this work proved even more easy than they had expected. Within less than 5 minutes, there was an opening large enough for a man to crawl through. Sure enough, in front of them was the low-browed opening of the mine adit. Clive reported that the jailers showed no signs of moving, so it was decided to start at once, and one by one they slipped through the opening. Clive switched on his torch, and the light showed a low-roof tunnel. The floor was greasy mud. Walls and roof were supported by timbers, most of them rotten, and some covered with thick white fungus which shone with a ghostly phosphorescent light. The air was dank and chilly, and heavy with the smell of dry rot. The tunnel ran steeply uphill, and that made travelling the harder. Jan, leading the way, kept a very stiff pace, and Clive, who had never before been underground, began to breathe hard. He was glad when Jan paused opposite the mouth of a cross passage and held the light so as to look down it. "Better keep straight on, hadn't we?" Chad said. "My notion is to stick to the main adit. The air's fresh, which seems to show there's an opening somewhere up this way." "Maybe you're right," Jan agreed, "but looks to me like the roof's rotten in the adit." "It's probably rotten everywhere," Chad said. "We've got to chance it and trust to luck." They'd gone about 100 yards beyond the crosscut when Jan pulled up. The light fell upon a monstrous mass of sharp-edged boulders which completely blocked their way. Jan shook his head. "Bain't no passing here," he said. "Us must go back, Mr. Chad." Chad bit his lip. "Not a hope," he said. "We must try the crosscut. Only hope it isn't a blind alley." They turned and, reaching the crosscut, entered it. It ran to the left, that is, to the north. Here the floor was drier, and they made better time. The air, however, was not so good, and the harsh odour of decay caught Clive's throat. The cut curved slightly to the right, and presently the light fell upon another block. The whole roof had given way, and tons of loose rock formed a huge barrier. Jan went forward and examined the fall. Clive, just behind him, saw that the piled rocks did not quite reach the roof. There was a space a foot or so wide between the top and the gap from which the rock had fallen. It seemed to Clive that there was just enough room to crawl through this opening, yet the risk of doing so was appalling, for the roof was so rotten that even Clive could see that a touch would bring it down. Jan looked at Chad. "It'd be bad, Mr. Chad," he said gravely. "Let's have a look," said Chad. And, taking the light, he climbed carefully up the side of the fall and looked through the gap. He came down again with equal care. "It's clear enough beyond, so far as I can see. Shall we chance it, Jan?" Jan hesitated. "It'd be taking a bad risk," he answered gravely. As he spoke, there came from the distance the sound of a crash. The three looked at one another, and all their faces showed that they knew what had happened. Clive spoke. "They're after us," he set his teeth. "We've jolly well got to try it." That's the end of chapter 12. Just about halfway through.